Hi guys and welcome back to SwitchUp. I've just finished watching the Gearbox live stream and I'll be honest, I'm a little bit sad we didn't see Borderlands 2 on the Nintendo Switch. Today we have a review for you from Jace Glover and it's of The Princess Guide from NIS America. After throwing some shade at Mark in my last review for asking me to do the Caligula effect via video, well, just check this out.
Jace, I need you. I need you to do me another review. I'm a desperate man.
Too much? Clearly he's trolling me now. I guess it's effective though, because here I am with another NIS review. Does the titular guide in this penny-punching princess lookalike lead us to the promised land or to disaster? Let's find out. The premise behind The Princess Guide is just as the title states. You play a seasoned warrior looking for more out of life, and so you embark on a quest to lead the princess of 4 different lands to their own personal goals. As soon as you begin, you're given choices regarding your character's personality and are told there will be differences in dialogue depending on what you pick, but in practice, it was extremely rare when I could tell, if ever, that the choices affected the story. This is going to be a running theme throughout this review, design choices that just fell short of their potential. The stories of the individual princesses do not fare much better. You're given a choice early on of which one to help first, but will ultimately interact with all 4 of them, being given another choice of which one you want to finish the game with. While I admit it is possible that the tales of the other 3 princesses might have been more interesting, the one I did finish was shallow. Story segments are riddled with confusing, broken dialogue and bad attempts at humour. Oftentimes the princess will talk to your character, but there will be no response and you're instead left to infer what you may have said based on her reaction. Other times your character does not have dialogue, so it's confusing why conversations aren't more complete throughout. While it adds replayability to have 4 different stories to play through, the one I did finish did not leave me wanting to hear more, and story scores 10 out of 20. The gameplay can be broken up into various segments: missions, squad management, and princess training. The missions are ultimately what will move the story along, where the other 2 segments provide the RPG element. To progress the story, you will have the option of sending out up to 6 squads of troops to various mission nodes on the generic Overworld Map. You will always have at least 2 squads available, as one is led by your character and the other by the current princess you're guiding. The other 4 available squadrons can be recruited via the base menu and for a small amount of gold, but in all honesty there's little reason to use anything outside of your 2 default teams. While troops are moving from mission point to mission point, they will encounter enemies roaming the map, at which point the game changes to a top-down action RPG. This is the real meat of the gameplay. There are quite a few options available to you during combat, such as small quick strikes, a knockback, a dash attack, and special attacks, and at first it felt fun and engaging. You also have certain abilities that can be used by your troops, including a handy but limited stun attack. Unfortunately, it gets old very quickly, because without any way to dodge or otherwise avoid enemy attacks, and a few ways to recover health during combat, the game becomes less about strategy and finesse, and more about spamming your quick attacks and the occasional stun on larger enemies. While controlling the princess, you also have the slightly unusual option to praise or scold her up to 3 times per battle. Which will have varying effects depending on the situation, but ultimately misses the mark on being engaging as soon as you realise that scolding her while she's low on health will instantly restore her to full HP. Killing enemies and exploring the zones for treasure chests will reward you with various items and gold. Returning to our theme of the review though, the loot fest that this tries to be is not implemented well at all. The commander of each squad is the only character who can equip items, and only 1 item at a time, so you can see how finding hundreds of them is pretty much useless. On top of that, you can only change these out if you withdraw your troops completely, which doesn't serve any purpose but to hamper the overall experience. The one saving grace with the item system is that each item provides very different special attacks, which does help vary the gameplay a touch. After withdrawing your troops, aside from swapping items, You can also change your squad around and train your princess to increase her stats. I feel like a broken record at this point, but these mechanics again fail to live up to the potential. Each unit type can be leveled up, but there is no indication as to what they actually gain by doing so. As far as I could tell, my level 1 soldier had the same strength as a level 40, correct me if I'm wrong. Much in the same vein, the princess's stats give no indication that they actually do anything. The game is miserable about explaining what the purpose of its various mechanics are for, and many of the important things are buried in the confusing menus. In fact, it took me over 2 hours of play before I found out that you can also increase the base stats of your own character. Even worse than this is I assumed the game was auto-saving my progress because it gave no indication I had to save manually. Unfortunately, I lost hours of time as I had to restart the entire game over again because, as it turns out, you do have to save manually, and the save option is buried deep in the menus. A very strange choice indeed. I could go on and on about the various other mechanics that the developers attempted to implement, but instead I'll just say this. Everything about this game gives the impression that 50 developers got together, each presented one idea, and then each and every idea was thrown into the game without any further thought on how to add depth or to make them work all cohesively. While the core combat is serviceable, it gets old very quickly and is surrounded by a myriad of confusing and unrewarding mechanics, and as such, gameplay scores 12 out of 20. The visuals are typical of Nippon-ichi games, with anime-style characters shown during story segments and chibi-style sprites used during the combat segments. I actually like the design of the main character, and each of the princesses have a unique look and style. What I don't like as much was the choice to make all the characters bounce uncontrollably when they speak. It was extremely jarring at first, but eventually you get used to it. The overworld map is generic and has little personality to speak of, and the backgrounds during combat segments suffer from the same treatment. The different levels and areas all start to blend together, and some of them use unattractive colour palettes and shading effects. This is not helped by the overly busy nature of the combat and the UI. It was all too often that I lost track of what was going on when too many enemies and effects were flashing across the screen. I'm going to nitpick a bit here as well, but I am pretty sure Nippon-ichi believes there is only one font in existence. I believe this is the 4th game I've played that used the same strange goofy font, and it sticks out like a sore thumb at this point. On the plus side, I did not notice any performance issues in either docked or handheld, and aside from my complaints above, the game looks crisp in both modes. Visuals score 11 out of 20. The audio is arguably the strongest aspect of the Princess Guide, but that's not saying a lot. I appreciate that the story segments not including your character are fully voice acted, typical of NISA games. It is worth noting that there is no English option, but the Japanese voice actors do a good job of portraying the intended emotions. The soundtrack and the combat sound effects are all perfectly acceptable, if not particularly memorable. Unlike the other categories discussed so far, there was nothing in terms of audio that stood out as a poor design choice or that didn't fit the theme. And given how confusing everything else is in the game, that in itself is praise indeed. Audio scores 14 out of 20. The Princess Guide will cost £35.99, $39.99 or €39.99, which certainly isn't cheap. If you pick up this game, you can expect about 8 hours to complete one princess's story, and 4 times that to see all of them. It's a decent amount of content for the price if you don't mind the repetitive gameplay loop, but it's hard to recommend fully at the price of admission. For a better loot fest ARPG experience, I feel you'd be better served and get many more hours out of something like Diablo 3 or Victor Vran, both of which can be purchased for cheaper. I must also give credit where it's due. Given NISA's recent track record of trying to charge full AAA price for their ports of older games and their bad habit of ignoring exchange rates, it's refreshing to see them heading in at least the right direction. Value scores 12 out of 20. To conclude, The Princess Guide is an action RPG that offers a number of intriguing concepts but ultimately trips over its own feet by trying to do too much. A shallow story, underdeveloped RPG mechanics, and uninspiring visuals surround solid but repetitive combat to create an ultimately confusing and disappointing experience. The Princess Guide receives a SwitchUp score of 59%. Thanks so much to Jace. This is his first review in a while. I know the guy's been really busy. Please leave him a comment down below. A massive thank you to our Patreons, and as always, for all things Switch, All the time, keep it switch up. Cheers guys, see ya!